The 1960s were a decade of continued struggle. Civil rights activists would continue to press for social justice and political equality, having seen few tangible effects of the efforts carried out in the 1950s. Some of the most dramatic of these struggles were over the integration of universities. In 1962, James Meredith famously became the first African American student to attend Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. The event prompted white resistance, and the riots that followed left 2 dead. Desegregation would come slowly to the South, and especially slowly to Mississippi. In Alabama, the Birmingham campaign of 1963 also triggered high levels of violence. Peaceful protesters were greeted by police officers and firefighters who turned police dogs and fire hoses on them. The resulting photographs, such as the one seen here, shocked the world and made the leaders of other southern cities, such as Savannah, mindful of their own public image. This photo from August of 1963 allows us to remember the issues that were front and center at the time. They are showcased on the signs carried by the protesters: decent pay, voting rights, jobs for all, integrated schools, equal rights. President Lyndon Johnson pressed for civil rights protections. Coming into office after the death of the incredibly popular young president, John F. Kennedy, Johnson knew that this was the time to press his advantage. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended legal segregation in public accommodations and called for an end to discrimination based on race, gender, and national or religious origin. On the heels of the 1964 legislation, activists continued to push for progress. A march was planned from Selma to Montgomery, calling for voting rights. Twice, white police officers beat back the marchers with tear gas and clubs. Riding on the media coverage of this horrific turn of events, President Johnson introduced the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which would pass through Congress and ban voting discrimination in elections at all levels. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King led a civil rights movement that was grounded in Christian values of pacifism and nonviolent resistance. Although the movement had been quite successful in many regards, by the mid-1960s, some African Americans had grown impatient. They wanted to see more rapid and significant change. The views of Malcolm X started to gain in popularity. Born Malcolm Little, Malcolm X had become radicalized while in prison. He had joined the Nation of Islam, a black nationalist group that advocated separation from whites. After a trip to Mecca, Malcolm X began shifting his views to a more moderate position. But soon he would be assassinated, most likely by a member of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X's views influenced the Black Panther Party, which formed in 1966. The Black Panthers called upon African Americans to arm themselves to be prepared for self-defense against attacking whites. The civil rights movement was shifting away from the ideals supported by Martin Luther King. In the early 1960s, American youth culture also began to question the rules of the existing social order. One of the most influential voices of critique came from Bob Dylan. In the second part of this unit, you will have the chance to listen closely to one of his most powerful recordings. As the counterculture began to take shape, youth fashions shocked the conservatives of previous generations. Men began to grow their hair longer and wear blue jeans in social settings. Women's skirts grew shorter, soon earning the name miniskirt. One of the most dramatic shifts of the 20th century would occur as a result of the women's movement. By the early 1960s, many American women were questioning their status in society. Many read Betty Friedan's 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, and saw themselves reflected in its pages. Friedan described the lives of white middle and upper middle class women residents of suburbia as if they were in a comfortable prison. Trapped away from the important business of society, she described a generation that was often educated, but isolated, and unsatisfied with the life of a stay-at-home mother. With the availability of the birth control pill in 1961, women took control of their own reproductive process, and Americans began to have fewer children. While African American and working class women had always worked outside the home in significant numbers, in the coming decades, more white and middle class women would begin to do so. The 1960s was a time of change in American society. The civil rights movement flourished and brought about substantial progress toward social justice, then began to shift toward the rhetoric of black nationalism and black power. Women spoke out and began to claim their own rights as well, even as American youth began to coalesce into a movement of their own. In the years to come, their voices would profoundly shape the nation's debates, especially those over the Vietnam conflict.